Hello and welcome to Boxset, Binge, the Bible, the podcast where we are going through the Bible in a year. My name is Bern, Leckie. I'm joined by Owen, Lynch.
Hello.
And this week has been an interesting week because we've been looking at some unusual bits of the Bible, some of the wisdom literature that's in the Bible, in Ecclesiastes and the Song of Songs and some of the Proverbs. And it's made me remember how important it is to get our heads around what the Bible is, like what the Bible is as a whole. And if you've been listening, if you've been with us for the last few months, you'll have heard us talk about this quite a bit. But I'm just wondering, Owen, if it's a good idea to recap a little bit on what we found so far, because actually there's a good chance someone might just start here, because these are books in the Bible that really stand out and they are a bit odd. You might be listening for the first time going, I wonder what these books are about. What do people think of these books? And so starting off with how we fit that into the Bible as a whole seems like a good idea. What do you think?
Yeah, that sounds great. So we are definitely approaching halfway through this box set Binge the Bible. And I think one of the questions that's kept on coming up for us is, how do we make use of this information that we're reading and listening to? You know, what difference can it make to our lives? So what? You know, that kind of question, really. And some people have, you know, I mean, certainly for me, kind of influenced me when I was a younger man. The idea that the Bible's kind of like this book of rules. It's the ultimate authority in life, and you just got to basically learn it and do what it says in here, and you can't go too far wrong. And actually, I think what we've discovered as we've been listening to the box set Binge through the Bible this year has been that actually that's not the case. That actually we can't just pick up the Bible and read it at face value. Sometimes we can get some good stuff from doing that, but we can't do that without understanding the context in which it's written. And for that, you know, I think these wisdom books that we've been listening to this week, Song of Songs and Ecclesiastes and a section of Proverbs, I think that demonstrates that reality very, very well, because what we have in these books is what we call wisdom literature, and I personally really value Proverbs, because what Proverbs is telling us is that life isn't as straightforward as we might think it should be. This idea that if you live a pure and holy life, then things will go well for you. We all know that's not true in our own experience, because life's hard, and you know, even the most holy and noble and moral people suffer. And so actually, Proverbs gives us a kind of insight into actually the wisdom of God is not 1 + 1 = 2. Life's not like that, and that's actually what we see in Proverbs, and I think we see it in Ecclesiastes and Song of Songs as well. What do you think, Bert?
Yeah, I would agree. One of the things I remember from growing up and being taught the Bible in a very sort of methodical way when I was a teenager was this acronym BIBLE, that the Bible was basic instructions before leaving Earth.
Is this for people going to the moon or something?
It's where are you going? So that manages to sort of weld together some really terrible bits of theology all in one neat little bundle. It sort of tells you that there's really not a lot of point in looking forward to a great quality of life on Earth, because you'll be leaving Earth. But before then, here are some basic instructions, and therefore it's an instruction manual. And obviously, if you need it to be an instruction manual, you need it to make sense. You need to be able to apply what people basically from about the sort of 17th, 18th century onwards started to see the Bible as a sort of a source of truth that they could mine to be able to construct systematically a theology that made sense of the universe, not just the physical workings of the universe, maybe not so much the physical workings of the universe the same way that Newton did when he looked at how laws of motion could be worked out, but the sort of theological equivalent of that. And that's where people like Calvin were coming from when they were going, okay, this is what it says in the Bible, so we're going to make this rules for our life. And a lot of the Bible seems to support that when you're looking at the laws. However, the big difficulties that you have with that, like we saw last week, is if you're looking at the Jewish law and then say, okay, which bits of this then should we live by? Well, when you look at the rest of the Bible, like the New Testament, and particularly when you're looking at Galatians, the answer is don't. If you're following Christ, you're not bound by the Jewish law. So immediately you're into a conversation. The Bible isn't an easy to consume rule book of basic instructions. It's more of a library of books, a conversation that's happening between these different bits of literature, and not just between the Old and New Testament, but this is within the Old Testament. This wisdom literature sits alongside the laws and says to you, look, if you thought you'd worked it all out, think again. If you thought that you could just look at the law and then take it and apply it and do your best and that would be it, yeah, you've missed some really vital things. But the thing is that if you're determined to look at the book as basic instructions before leaving Earth, then Ecclesiastes particularly just looks like it oughtn't to be in there. Like if you picked up a Bible that didn't have Ecclesiastes in, and then someone gives you that, I say, oh, I'm sorry, we forgot to put this bit into the book. Can you just slot it in? It goes in between there and there. You'd probably look at it and go, no, it doesn't. This clearly doesn't fit the Bible. Why would I think this is in the Bible? So it's a tricky and interesting book, but I think the main reason to try and make sense of it is because it is part of the whole. And so looking at why it's important to grasp this sort of meaninglessness or this randomness or all this stuff that you don't know, I think it's really, really vital.
Yeah, I agree. And I think if people are, minded to view the world in black and white terms, kind of, they want some clarity. And let's face it, we all, during times of uncertainty, we really do try and cling on to something that has some sense of security and gives us peace of mind, right? So it's not surprising that we long to do this. And I think, it's easy sometimes to approach the Bible with that kind of approach. I'm desperate. I need something to hold on to that gives me confidence and makes me feel secure. And what we're not saying is that you shouldn't do that. Actually, the Bible is full of wonderful insights and wisdom, which will give us incredible security. No question about that. And yet, at the same time, recognizing that as you've said, if a Christian was to read Ecclesiastes and given the option, is this in the Bible or not? They'd probably say, no, I don't think so. It's not that consistent. It's not that consistent with this kind of black and white worldview, which is kind of like, if you do this, this will happen. In fact, if anything, the author of Ecclesiastes actually says quite the opposite, and actually says, you know what, life is almost, I wouldn't say meaningless, because I don't think that is the translation of the word, because the Hebrew word is actually vapor, but it actually is more like it's temporary. It doesn't last very long. That's the whole point. So when there's a warm day and you've got an early morning mist, that mist is going to burn off, and that's what the author is trying to communicate here, that life is like that. It's that temporary. So what the author is trying to do is grapple with this idea of life's so short and temporary. What meaning is there in life? And obviously that's something that we all from time to time may grapple with. And I personally, as a young man in my early 20s, was not quite sure what I wanted to do in my life. When I was a teenager, I wanted to be a pilot. My eyesight wasn't good enough, so I couldn't do that. So I went and did a degree in geography that I'd already kind of planned to do. Came out of that, thought, I don't know what to do. Got on a grad scheme with a big finance firm. Did that, didn't really enjoy it, and actually, do you know what I realized in those few years? And maybe it was because I was I was kind of reading the Bible, and I was mixing it with a bunch of people who kind of really valued the Bible. I think what I did come out of it was there was this part in Ecclesiastes about how do you live well when life's only short. How do you live well? And I think what I concluded was that actually, for me, a life well lived included being of committing to my family, committing to my friends, and committing to enjoying work that is enjoyable and fulfilling on a daily basis, rather than doing a job that I didn't find fulfilling on a daily basis, but perhaps just gave me a load of money. So actually I decided then to retrain as a physio. But I think what was underpinning that was this sense in Ecclesiastes, well, if life is short, what are you going to actually prioritize? What's important? And I didn't want to be on my deathbed at some point in the future regretting that I hadn't prioritized what I knew was important. So for me, this stuff in Ecclesiastes really resonates with where I was at in my in my 20s. And I'm really grateful that I've had the opportunity to do that and have had meaningful work and enjoy what I do day to day. And also, I've been able to have enough health and means to enjoy my family and friends as well.
I think the link between work and satisfaction is explored maybe best in Ecclesiastes, better there than any other book in the Bible, and maybe better than any other book I've ever read, to be honest with you, because it really tackles the motivations that I recognise as wanting to find meaning and an identity sometimes in work or in gathering wealth, or just work as being the means to be secure and have money or whatever as security. And Ecclesiastes addresses that uncomfortably directly and saying, no, that is vapor, as you say. It's like, don't rely on stuff that you think you should be able to rely on, which is really discomforting. But then on the other hand, there is encouragement. This is what brings me back to Ecclesiastes. I keep coming back to verses like chapter 2, verse 24. A person can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in their own toil. This too I see is from the hand of God. For without him, who can eat or find enjoyment? I love that, because it adds this dimension that is missing in just work by itself or money by itself or anything by itself. The dimension that it's adding is from the hand of God. From the hand of God, everything makes more sense. Everything looks more meaningful, because on its own it is meaningless. But when you make that link with the hand of God, then you can find satisfaction. You can find a sort of a longer lasting dimension and substance to what you're looking for in life, what your heart is saying. I want something here. What do I really want? And is it just work by itself? Is it just money by itself? Or is it making good use of all of those things, remembering that they're from God?
I agree. Yeah, there's a good book out at the moment by a guy called Patrick Grant, and it's called Less. And really it's asking this sort of question, is that what do I need for a happy and contented life? And his conclusion is that we need a lot less of what our world can provide for us with than we actually realise. It's worth reading if you've or listening to if you've not heard of that book before. It's just out at the moment. Ben, what's your favourite part?
I've got quite a few favourite parts. The bits that I keep hearing quoted in other places, especially chapter 3 on a time for everything. I love that description of sort of rhythms in life, that there are things that sometimes seem really important but then fade away because other things become more important. I love the encouragement in chapter 4 that 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their labour. If one falls down, the other helps someone up. I think those encouragements are really important to glean when we go through a book that otherwise looks like it's difficult to grasp. Because when we go through and we find the bits that we find encouraging personally, I think that's where the gold is. That's what God wants us to find in those things. But also I'm struck by the descriptions that remind me that whenever I think I've got everything sorted out, I probably haven't. Chance will be a big thing in life. There's a thing in chapter 9. The race is not to the swift, or the battle to the strong, nor does food come to the wise, or wealth to the brilliant, or favour to the learned, but time and chance happen to them all. On the weekend, we were just getting ready for getting our son off to camp and having a nice, comfy, settled week. And by complete random chance, a dish exploded that Helen had in her hand, and it sliced through her finger, and she had to rush off to hospital.
Gosh, yeah.
And there was blood everywhere, and I had to do a new dinner and clean the kitchen before we could start getting our son ready for bed. And so I was doing that at home while Helen was being whisked off to hospital. And there's a way of looking at life where you say, everything has to have a meaning and a purpose. What did we do to deserve this? If we work hard, we'll be blessed. And if we don't work hard, then horrible things will happen to us. Well, we've already seen in Job that that's a silly way of looking at it. And this underlines that as well. We have to get out of this way of thinking that the Bible just tells us, we could take so literally the thing about obey the law and everything goes well, and don't and it won't. Chance happens to everybody. And this is a good reminder of that. And it just happened to come at a perfect time in our lives.
Oh, is her finger all right now?
It's getting much better, thank you. Yes, thanks for asking.
Good.
It's getting much, much better. It's in a little mini splint and the doctors seem fairly confident it'll heal up by itself, but it will take quite a bit of time.
Oh, bastard.
Now, let's move on to Song of Songs, because this is a different kind of story. It's a love story. I love it. It's it looks like a wedding. I went and looked to see, do people actually use it in weddings? Yes, they do. In lots of Jewish traditions, people quote certain bits from it. But also, in several Jewish traditions, people read it together near the Passover. So more than just a wedding and a relationship between two people read more into it, been reading more into it for a long time. Is it about God's love for Israel? That's part of the Jewish tradition of reading it. And then Christian commentators have added to that. Is it about Christ's love for the church? Is it about our love for God in general? It's a really rich set of descriptions of love that again stand out in the Bible because they don't quite look like anything else. What did you think?
Yeah, I agree. It's actually always been one of my favorite parts of the Bible. And as a pastor, I marry a lot of couples, and often we do use some of this stuff in wedding ceremonies. And of course, that's in a Christian tradition, as you say. It's had meaning in a Jewish tradition as well. What's quite interesting is that scholars have, in their research of ancient Egyptian and Babylonian love poetry, have actually found that there's love poetry in those traditions that's very, very similar to this. That actually this is a collection of ancient poetry which reflects the value of divine love in Jewish Israelite society. But what I think is quite interesting about Song of Songs is the context is a garden, and of course a key feature of the Jewish history texts is this idea of the Garden of Eden and Adam and Eve being placed in the Garden of Eden by Yahweh. And so I find that the setting for Song of Songs has added resonance within the Jewish origin story of the Garden of Eden. And I like that. I really like that. And for me, personally, Song of Songs, it's a wonderful riposte to the puritanical tradition, which still permeates some of the modern evangelical church. And ever since I've been in a church, and I'm going back now for like 25 years, I've often found that the whole sexual romantic relationship thing is kind of something that Christians aren't very good at dealing with, and often is confused with puritanical or issues of holiness. And I think when you read Song of Songs, it's kind of like a big kind of thumbs up to, well, not thumbs up, it's almost like a thumbs down to that culture. It's actually a riposte, if you like, to that culture, whereby we say, actually no, God's love and love between two people is deeply passionate, incredibly beautiful, incredibly creative, incredibly erotic, and in so many ways words that you just wouldn't normally hear spoken about in some evangelical churches.
Absolutely. And the power of describing love in the way that it's described in Song of Songs I think is really important. Like it's breathtakingly powerful the way it's described, and a couple of verses that are quoted perhaps the most often, as they even come up in Christian weddings, in Roman Catholic and Orthodox churches have these as optional readings in a wedding liturgy. Chapter 8, verses 6 and 7. Place me like a seal over your heart, like a seal on your arm, for love is as strong as death. Its jealousy unyielding as the grave. It burns like blazing fire, like a mighty flame. Many waters cannot quench love. Rivers cannot sweep it away. To use words that have become very popular in the discussion of how we look at the Bible and what's the most important thing, Rob Bell wrote a book called Love Wins. Love wins. Love is the most powerful force, I think, that we find described in the Bible. And we've talked recently as well about how love and the law fit with each other. And trying to understand love through the lens of the law, I think, is really difficult. It's kind of like looking at through a telescope the wrong way round. If we can understand the law through the lens of love, on the other hand, then I think we get a better view of the universe as a whole. And without it, I think it's just pointless trying to get our heads around the law. We've got to get our heads around love if we ever can. And actually, Song says, you probably can't. You just need to go with it. You need, look at what it is when you find it. It's incredibly powerful and nothing can overcome it.
Yeah, exactly. The pursuit of love is probably one of the hardest things in life to do, but is incredibly instinctive nonetheless, right? And we kind of know what love is, even if we don't necessarily choose to act in a loving way. So, yeah, I agree. And actually, there's a massive summary there, isn't there? That word is a massive summary, rather, of all this wisdom literature. It really is at the heart of everything.
Yes, God's view of things seems so much bigger, it strikes me, than we can work out on our own, especially if we're just drilling down into the law all the time. I think it's now important to turn our ears to what is God saying about how it all goes. God had a look at what Israel was doing and how it was trying to put the law into practice, whether it was grasping his word and his intentions as a whole, or whether it was failing in some way. And the people that are recorded in the Bible as having something to say about that are the prophets. And so next week we're going to turn to two of the prophets, Hosea and Joel. And we're going to look at some of the Psalms as well as people reflect their thoughts and experiences back to God in turn. So Hosea, Joel, and Psalms 52 to 65 are our plan for next week.
Fantastic. Happy listening, guys. We'll see you next week.
Bye.